What if a government software decision could change how an entire continent buys technology? France has announced a major shift toward Linux and sovereign digital tools inside parts of its public sector. If that approach spreads, the impact goes far beyond desktop operating systems. It could influence billions in contracts, reshape procurement rules, and weaken the assumption that Microsoft products are the automatic choice across Europe. For years, Microsoft has held a powerful position inside European institutions. Windows PCs, Microsoft Office, Teams, and Azure became deeply integrated into ministries, schools, local governments, and public agencies. Once those systems are embedded, switching becomes expensive and disruptive. That lock-in has helped Microsoft remain central to public sector IT for decades. Now, France is openly challenging that model. According to multiple industry reports, France's Interministerial Directorate for Digital Affairs, known as DINM, is advancing plans to reduce reliance on Windows and other non-European software as part of a wider digital sovereignty strategy. In practical terms, that means giving government departments more control over the software they run, where data is stored, and how future technology decisions are made. That phrase, digital sovereignty, is becoming one of the most important ideas in European tech policy. It means critical systems should not be entirely dependent on foreign vendors, foreign infrastructure, or pricing decisions made outside Europe. Governments want stronger control over cybersecurity, legal jurisdiction, data governance, and long-term costs. Instead of accepting whatever roadmap a global supplier sets, they want leverage. And Windows is only one part of the conversation. France has also promoted domestic or sovereign alternatives for communication and collaboration. Public sector tools such as CHAP for messaging and France Transfer for secure file sharing were created to reduce dependence on mainstream foreign platforms. Broader initiatives grouped under La Suite Numérique aim to provide a more independent productivity ecosystem for state use. That is why this development deserves attention. The bigger issue is not whether Microsoft loses one contract. The bigger issue is whether Europe starts questioning the default technology stack it has relied on for years. For a long time, many organizations chose Microsoft because everyone else already used Microsoft. Staff were familiar with Windows. Documents were built around Office formats. IT teams were trained around the same ecosystem. Compatibility made the existing choice easier to repeat. France is now testing whether that cycle can be broken. If a major government can migrate even part of its workforce to Linux and alternative software, other institutions may feel more confident exploring similar options. That does not mean every country will abandon Windows. It means future purchasing decisions may become more competitive. And there is historical precedent. France's National Gendarmerie became widely known for deploying a customized Ubuntu-based system called Genbuntu years ago. That migration was often cited as an example of how large public organizations could adopt open-source software at scale. Germany's city of Munich also ran the well-known Linux project, which moved thousands of desktops to Linux before later changing direction and continuing debates over open-source policy. These earlier projects matter for one reason: the idea is no longer theoretical. Governments already know Linux can work in real administrative environments. The real question is whether today's political climate creates enough motivation to push further than before. And the timing is not random. Across Europe, policymakers have become more cautious about dependence in strategic sectors. Energy security, semiconductor supply chains, defense manufacturing, telecommunications, and cloud computing are now discussed through the lens of resilience. Software has joined that list. The logic is straightforward. If email systems, collaboration tools, identity services, and desktop platforms are controlled externally, then public institutions may have fewer options during pricing disputes, regulatory conflict, or geopolitical tension. Even without a crisis, dependence itself is increasingly viewed as a risk. That is where Linux becomes attractive. Because Linux is open source, its code can be audited, modified, and deployed under different support models. Governments can choose local vendors, build internal expertise, and adapt systems to their own security requirements. They may still pay for support and services, but they are less tied to a single commercial roadmap. That said, migration is difficult. Large-scale government migrations also involve risks that private companies often do not face. Public administrations run tax systems, healthcare records, transportation databases, court services, education portals, and citizen identity platforms. Even a minor technical disruption can affect millions of people. If a payroll system fails, salaries may be delayed. If a records platform breaks, essential services can slow down. That raises the standard for every technical decision. Security validation adds another layer of complexity. New operating environments must pass compliance checks, internal audits, procurement reviews, and cybersecurity assessments before they can be deployed widely. Agencies also need clear patch management policies, incident response procedures, backup strategies, and long-term maintenance plans. A migration is not complete when devices boot successfully. It is complete when the new environment can be governed reliably. There is also the challenge of specialized software. Some departments depend on niche applications built years ago for a single purpose, often by contractors no longer involved. Replacing those tools may require redevelopment, virtualization, or temporary compatibility layers. In some cases, the software is so critical that it delays migration for entire departments. Human factors are just as important as technical ones. Employees under workload pressure may resist unfamiliar systems if they believe productivity will drop. That means communication, training materials, help desks, and leadership support become central to success. When users feel abandoned, even good technology can fail. When users feel supported, adoption becomes far easier. This is why governments often begin with lower-risk environments, such as administrative desktops, shared workstations, or departments with simpler software needs. Lessons from those early deployments can then shape later phases involving more sensitive systems. Over time, that measured strategy can produce results that sudden overhauls rarely achieve. Instead of one disruptive national switch, progress happens through accumulated wins. One office modernized, one budget reduced, one support model improved, one dependency removed. From the outside, it may look slow. Inside the government, that pace is often the difference between failure and lasting change. That is where Microsoft faces pressure. Not through a dramatic collapse or a sudden loss of Europe, but through something slower and often more consequential, a change in leverage. For years, many large institutions negotiated with Microsoft from a weak position because replacing core systems felt unrealistic. If an organization believed there was no practical substitute for Windows, Office, Exchange, Teams, or Azure, then price increases, licensing changes, and bundled products became harder to resist. Even when buyers were unhappy, the cost of leaving could seem higher than the cost of staying. That dynamic changes the moment credible alternatives exist. If more European governments demonstrate that Linux desktops, open-source productivity tools, sovereign cloud platforms, or mixed vendor environments can function at scale, procurement teams gain options. And in enterprise markets, options create bargaining power. A supplier does not need to lose the customer entirely to feel pressure. It is enough for the customer to have a realistic path elsewhere. That can affect contract negotiations in several ways. First, buyers may push harder on pricing. Long-term enterprise agreements worth millions are often renewed because disruption appears too risky. But when alternatives become believable, renewal terms may face more scrutiny. Governments may ask for lower costs, clearer licensing models, or more flexibility in seat counts and bundled services. Second, interoperability becomes a bigger demand. Public institutions may insist that documents, communication systems, identity tools, and storage platforms work cleanly with competing products. That reduces lock-in and makes future transitions easier. Open standards, portable data formats, and documented AP has become more than technical preferences. They become strategic requirements. Third, purchasing becomes more selective. Instead of adopting one vendor across every layer of IT, Agencies may choose separate providers for different functions. A department might keep Windows for specialized software, use another platform for collaboration, host workloads with a regional cloud provider, and rely on independent cybersecurity tools. That fragmented model can reduce dependence on any single company. For Microsoft, those shifts matter even if revenue remains strong. Microsoft is still one of the most powerful enterprise technology companies in the world. Its strengths go far beyond desktop operating systems. Azure is a major global cloud platform. Microsoft 365 generates recurring subscription income. Its security portfolio is deeply embedded in corporate networks. AI products are being integrated across its ecosystem. None of that disappears because one country rethinks public sector desktops. But scale does not eliminate sensitivity to market direction. Large companies watch signals. If procurement priorities change in one major region, strategy often changes with them. Product teams may need to improve portability. Sales teams may offer more flexible terms. Compliance capabilities may expand. Local hosting options may become more important. Competitive threats are not always measured by lost customers today, but by changed expectations tomorrow. And that is the deeper significance here. The core question is no longer only, which product has the most features? Increasingly, it is, which provider leaves us with the most control over our future? That question reaches every layer of modern IT. Who stores the data, and where is it physically located? Which legal jurisdiction governs access requests or disputes? Can prices rise sharply after dependence is established? How costly is migration if priorities change later? Can systems integrate with competitors without penalties or friction? Will a vendor support open standards or favor proprietary ecosystems? These may sound like procurement details, but they influence billion-dollar decisions. When enough institutions start asking them, markets move. And Microsoft is not the only company paying attention. Amazon Web Services, Google Cloud, Oracle, Cisco, and major collaboration vendors all operate in a market where sovereignty concerns are growing. If European governments start favoring open standards, regional hosting, or domestic suppliers, competitive dynamics change across the board. That could create openings for European firms. Local cloud providers, cybersecurity companies, Linux support specialists, and open-source integrators may gain new opportunities if public sector budgets are redirected internally. Instead of sending large portions of spending abroad, governments may try to strengthen local capability. Still, caution is necessary. Europe has launched ambitious tech strategies before, and not all moved quickly. Bureaucracy slows implementation. Political priorities change. Costs can rise during transition. Users can resist new systems. Some projects achieve partial success rather than full transformation. So no, Microsoft's European position is not collapsing tomorrow. But the old assumption of permanence may be weakening. That distinction matters more than dramatic headlines. Dominance in enterprise technology rarely disappears in one moment. It becomes less certain, less automatic, and more contested over time. France may represent an early sign of that process. If its transition delivers practical results, even limited ones, other governments will study the outcome closely. They will look at costs, user satisfaction, security, compatibility, and vendor leverage. If the evidence is strong enough, similar strategies could spread in different forms across Europe. Not every country will choose Linux. Not every agency will leave Microsoft. But more institutions may insist on having a credible alternative. And once customers have a credible alternative, the balance of power changes. That is the real story behind France's move. This is not simply about replacing Windows with Linux on office computers. It is about who controls critical digital infrastructure, who sets the terms of dependency, and who has the freedom to walk away. Because the moment governments prove they can leave, Microsoft stops being inevitable and starts being optional.